So what do you do if that little yellow center point in the middle of your sketch disappears on you when you're in the middle of a sketch? In this video, I'm going to show you how to bring back your center point or your origin there, as well as how to avoid getting rid of it in the first place. What that center point is it's the middle of your three Cartesian axes. So your X, your Y, and your Z axes. That center point is the origin, or where all three of those axes intersect. So in Inventor, no matter which plane you sketch on, you're always going to have a little yellow point right at the middle of the two axes. So for example, if I'm starting a sketch on my XY plane, I have my center point between my X and my Y axes, and the same would go for the other two planes as well. Now, when that point disappears, it's likely because you've accidentally deleted it from your sketch. Now, the reason you're able to delete it is this is actually just projected into your sketch. It's not a permanent point. It's kind of just part of the sketch that's been projected there for your convenience. So you can actually delete it, and then when you go to draw, you no longer have that snap point that shows up connecting to that point. Now this can be very frustrating. We use that center point for our constraints. We use that center point when we're putting dimensional constraints, when we're drawing and we're trying to center our drawing. It's a very, very handy point that we want there. So to bring it back, when you're in your sketch, you need to come over to this folder over here in our model browser, and there's this folder called Origin. If you expand that origin folder, you actually have all of your planes, your three Cartesian planes, your three Cartesian axes, as well as this center point. And if you highlight over it, if I'm just hovering my mouse over it right now, you can see it show up in the middle of my screen there. So there's two ways you can make your center point visible in your sketch. The first way is the way that Inventor does it by default for you, which is just projecting geometry into your sketch. So again, while I'm still working in my sketch here, I'm coming up to my ribbon on my sketch tab, and I'm coming up to this project geometry button right here. And if you left click on project geometry, and then you come over to that origin folder, you're just going to left click on center point. And notice what it does is that brings back that little yellow point for you, and you guys can continue drawing like you normally would. So projected geometry will only show up in your sketch. It does not show up in any other sketches, and when that sketch is not visible in your 3D world, so when you're outside of your sketch, then that projected geometry won't show up and kind of get muddled and confused with the other parts or features of your drawing here. So projected geometry will only work within this one sketch. Now, if I go back into my sketch here, I'll show you the other way we can bring the origin point. So let's say you've gone ahead and you've deleted it once again. Big sigh. So now we need to bring that back. The second way you can bring your origin point back is just to make the center point visible. So instead of projecting geometry, you again come over to your model browser, you open up that origin folder, come down to center point, just right click on center point, and you're going to come down to visibility. Right now there's no check mark beside visibility, so I can't actually see that point. If I right click and put a check mark beside visibility now, and I'll show you that right there, now when I select inside of my graphics window here, that center point stays visible, and you can use it just like you would if it was that other little yellow point. So I could draw my shape here, and I could dimension between my shape and that origin point. Now, the difference between the two, so between projecting geometry or just making the center point visible, is that when you have visibility turned on, this will show up in all of your sketches in your 3D feature. So for example, right now that I'm back in my 3D feature here, that center point will stay visible. And I'll just kind of show you that, for example, here. So I'm going to just quickly create just a really rough sketch here. So I'm going to finish sketch, and I'm going to extrude. Now, the very first time you extrude something in your file here, your sketch will just sort of disappear on you, and that's because the visibility is automatically turned off. So I'm going to click OK and see what happens. My rectangle that's in my sketch 1 here has disappeared. The visibility is turned off. However, notice that my center point is still visible. And that's because I've turned on the visibility of that, and it's going to stay there until I come over, right-click, and turn off the visibility of that center point. Now, if we had just projected geometry, so I'm going to come into my sketch 1 again. I'm going to turn off visibility for my center point, and I'm just going to project geometry. This is that first way we did it, and just project that center point into my sketch. There's my little yellow dot. Now, if I finish sketch, okay, so I finished sketch, and right now I don't have any extrusions in here, so my sketch is still visible. I'm going to extrude just like I did earlier, hit OK, but notice this time the little yellow dot disappears because it's only existing in my sketch. So that's the difference between the two different ways in which you can bring your center point or that origin point back into your sketch and use it as part of your sketch.